But first, Ken Liu was born in China and moved to the United States when he was 11. When he was a boy, he read a Star Wars novel, and it changed his life. In the last few years, Ken Liu has become one of the most honored writers in science fiction, winning every major award in the field. And there are many other layers to Ken Liu. He graduated from Harvard and Harvard Law School, worked in technology, and has been an expert witness in trials. He spoke recently at Bates College in Lewiston, and we caught up with him there. At what point did you decide that you wanted to try your hand at writing fiction?
My initial attempt at being a commercial sci-fi writer was an abysmal failure. I could not get anybody to take a chance on my manuscript. My grandparents refused to read it, claiming to be too busy. My friends would not read it because they were just like, no, you wrote it. We're not reading something you wrote. You know, we want to read real books. I did, in the end, finally convince my aunt to read it. And I think her comment was that your spaceship is too dangerous. I would never ride on this spaceship of yours. So that was the first feedback I got.
One interesting part of your background, and correct me if I'm wrong on the details here, but when you went to law school and you had to write a final thesis or paper for it, instead of writing some sort of kind of legal analysis or legal history, you wrote a work of fiction.
That's right. You know, it ended up having a courtroom scene with courtroom drama. So I think I fulfill my requirements of law school.
Writing has clearly worked out for you. You clearly have a gift for it. You've won every award there is, major award there is in the field of science fiction over the last few years. Are you surprised by your success?
Here's my thought on awards. I think awards are awesome because they often sort of represent basically a good job, attaboy, you know, type of thing from your fellow writers and from the jury. But other than that, I'm not sure they mean much. I certainly don't measure my own success as a storyteller based on awards I win or don't win.
So getting a fan letter or having someone come up to you and tell you how much they enjoyed your book, that's what
I think
is
it's
really
wonderful,
rewarding.
but I wouldn't even call it fan letter because sometimes I feel like the word fan implies some sort of unequal relationship, and I really don't feel that way to my readers. If some story or novel elicits that kind of reaction from even one reader, and if I myself feel that it's a wonderful story that I managed to capture something of my vision, then I had an amazing success with that story.
You said that you don't gauge your success by what the market, how the market responds. And I read about a story you wrote that you really liked. You thought it was a good piece of work, and it didn't sell, and it didn't sell, and it didn't sell. Finally, after 7 years,
Yes.
you were able to sell that. How did you feel when that one finally sold what you thought was an excellent piece of work?
It's actually even a better story than that because when the story did finally sell, it sold to an anthology whose theme was stories that have been rejected many times. So it really was sort of the universe is trying to send me a message of some sort, you know. When the story finally sold, I actually learned a very important lesson, and it's not necessarily the lesson you might think it is. I mean, if I were to take the, you know, chicken soup for the soul approach, I would say, you know, the lesson here is you got to keep on trying because there's always a market for your story, including a market that takes only rejected stories. I mean, how much more contrived can you get? The lesson that I actually learned was that I was focused on the wrong thing. Being focused on things I couldn't control at all is not a way to live a fulfilling artistic life.
And you have no control over whether a story sells. You have control over the story. If it's a good story, if it's a mediocre story, if it's a bad story, that's your responsibility.
That's right.
But it's not your responsibility to have the marketplace say, yes, we will buy it.
You're exactly right. You have no control over whether your story sells, whether it's going to be a bestseller, whether you're going to win an award. So those are all the reasons why I don't particularly care about those measures of success.
How challenging is it for a writer of science fiction these days to write about the future when things are changing so rapidly and in ways that we didn't envision 5, 10, 15 years ago?
I know. I often, you know, I think sometimes people have this idea that science fiction writers are futurists, and then whether their job is to predict the future. I actually think that's the least interesting way to think about science fiction or to write it. You know, I did work for many years as a technologist and in the technology field, and my conclusion is that predicting the future is incredibly hard and often not interesting, because whether you happen to get the prediction right or not is largely based on luck. I think science fiction is about telling stories about how to remain human in the face of cataclysmic change. And because we're faced with so many changes occurring at such a rapid pace, how to remain human has become even more important as a question.
Ken Liu has some good news for admirers of his work. For about 15 years, he had been a part-time writer. He is now full-time. He has, in his words, a bunch of novels he wants to finish.